Richard B. Hayes, who wrestled with the moral vision of the New Testament, has died. So this is on Christianity Today. Subheadline: the influential scholar said his commitment to the literary unity of Scripture led him to change his mind on Christian sexual ethics. So I actually haven't read this guy at all, and I know a lot of people find that appalling, surely. But, Robert Gagnon, who's one of the main leading voices on human sexuality and Christianity that I appreciate, has thoroughly argued with Hayes publicly after he published this most recent book. It's really a sad thing. I saw my sister Deborah at Resources for Redemption posted a thing saying how sad she was that he died in this state of confusion. Let's read a little bit about him, and then I'll talk a little bit about stuff. Richard B. Hayes, the New Testament scholar who taught the narrative unity of Scripture and changed his mind late in life about the morality of homosexuality because he said of the narrative of Scripture, died on January 3rd. He was 76. Hayes was the author of Echoes of Scripture in the Letters of Paul, New Testament Ethics, The Conversion of the Imagination, Reading with the Grain of Scripture, and The Moral Vision of the New Testament, which Christianity Today named as one of the 100 most important Christian books of the 20th century. Quote, Hayes has hit a home run every time he has stepped to the plate. CT reported in 1999. What makes his approach hard for skeptics to resist is the quality of his mind. Supple, clear, and persuasive, extremely well informed. It is hard to find a hole in his arguments. In his final book, however, which he co-wrote with his son, Hayes announced that he had found a hole himself. He had changed his mind about the biblical teachings on sexual ethics. In fact, he argued he believed that God had changed God's mind. So while the New Testament clearly condemns homosexuality, God doesn't anymore. God's mercy got wider. So immediately you see where this stuff comes to be at odds with Scripture itself. You know, when Hebrews says God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, whenever there's explicit Scripture against homosexual acts and non-heterosexual acts, then you find yourself in a position where you are contradicting Scripture. And so what you're always going to find is either an abandonment of Scripture altogether, or someone saying Scripture generally goes in this direction with these ethics. Therefore, these parts of Scripture that contradict that, I can disregard. We can and should disregard. God's mercy got wider. Hayes argued this late development in his thinking was grounded, however, in his view of the Bible. And this is not uncommon. People who make this case often say, I came to this place because of the Bible, not in spite of the Bible. This is one of the things that's really hard for normal people to contend with, because you'll find somebody who knows the Bible very well, who is very articulate and intelligent. And you go, well, if this guy can come to this conclusion, well, then maybe it is a reasonable conclusion to come to. And oftentimes the people who react against that most strongly are the people who go in this very anti-intellectual direction. They just go, see, this is what seminaries do. This is what higher education does. You can't have any kind of refined reading of the Scriptures. You can just only have this plain reading that is very two-dimensional. And that I would consider somewhat of an overreaction. And so people look at, well, here's where these very nuanced and likable people are. Here's where these very unlikable and mean people are. I don't want to be like them, so I'll be more like this. And I think we have to have, well, the line I'm trying to walk in the middle is not anti-intellectual, but is skeptical of anybody, regardless of how educated they are. And where I do believe in a plain meaning of Scripture, but I also do believe that there are multiple levels on which Scripture is true, and I'd like to think that I articulate that not just winsomely, but compellingly. And I think we have to have more people like that, because the thing is, whenever you do allow for the voice to win, here's, where it engages, where I'm talking about all the time with the Global Methodist Church. I think if we continue to elevate voices that talk about the grand scheme of Scripture, or some kind of meta-narrative or set of principles that it's all boiled down to, I think you lay the groundwork for the same faithlessness that we saw in the United Methodist Church. Because we humans are self-referential. We're going to see whatever we want to see there. There's this thing called the Barnum effect or confirmation bias, where We see patterns that aren't there. We see what we self-interestedly want to see. That's why horoscopes have maintained in their popularity for a long time. We just easily discount the stuff that doesn't apply or that contradicts the truth, and then we hold to what seems to fit. And people do that with scripture as well. We come up with our own subjective things that we want to see that feel right to us, and then we impute these principles onto the Bible. We grab onto the things that match that. We dismiss the things that don't. And that's a faithless relationship with the scriptures. Something that we need to remember is that often throughout history, the people who know the scriptures the best are the heretics. Satan knows the scriptures like the back of his hand. Just because someone is well educated, just because someone knows the scriptures very well, this does not mean, and just because they're nice, being holy is not the same thing as being nice. We want to look at these different things here and say, well, aren't these fruits of faithfulness? And the answer is no. Faith is the fruit of faithfulness. Reflecting what is actually found in a plain way in the Bible is the fruit. And when you don't have that discernment, then people like Hayes here can take a lot of people with them. And I and others have been afraid that very reasonable, very likable people like him do win a lot of people away from Christ. Let's read a little bit more. The scripture read as a narrative offers a vision of God who is dynamic and personal and can constantly surprise us by reshaping what we thought we knew as settled matters, he told CNN. While many Christians are startled by the idea that God might change his mind, Hayes argued that idea has more to do with Greek philosophy than the revelation of Scripture. Quote, there are plenty of stories that do show God changing his mind, he said. That's the God of Scripture. He's unchangeable in that he has revealed himself as a God who changes. When it says that he doesn't change, it actually means he doesn't change in the sense that he changes. That's on the face of it a ridiculous idea, but because someone has this degree or because they have books that people love, they get taken seriously. If you want to read more of that Christianity Today article, I have the link to it in the show notes, and you can read it yourself. I think it's a sad time. Anybody dies, and you have to say goodbye. But also, I don't know. I don't feel good about what he was saying. I think a lot of people, this is why it's so important for people to know that the appeal to authority is a logical fallacy and will lead you astray. Thomas Sowell, who's a social theorist and economist that I really love, he has a number of good zingers about cultural elites and experts. They've just done so much harm. They've also done some good. I mean, you want to acknowledge that, but they've done so much harm as experts that expect people to defer to them. Really, it's just not a good thing when we defer to experts. And as I talk, I hope I don't put myself forward as I'm an expert, you should listen to me. And I think all leaders, especially nowadays when we've lost so much trust with experts, have to say, you need to think this through for yourself. Here's what I find compelling. And maybe Hayes did that, I don't know. But I think as soon as you abandon the plain meaning of Scripture with respect to any topic, and this is where my tribe finds itself. Well, most recently, I've been really pushing back against people who don't think that penal substitutionary atonement is important. Scripturally, it's just so plainly volunteered that I'm saying, look, if you have a problem with penal substitutionary atonement, then you have a problem with the Bible. I have a problem. I might like you very much. I might love you, but we have a problem here. I'm not sure that we're sharing in the same faith if you can't validate this plainly scriptural position. And there are a number of things like that where we've said, okay, well, with the gay stuff, the Bible is definitely right. But with these other things, there's a moral vision to the Bible. Things clearly go in a certain direction. I don't see how this fits with that. So we're going to have to dismiss that. The moment you're willing to do that with Scripture, you open this door that I don't think you can close. And so I'm really concerned about that going forward.